Children's and young adult authors often explore the pain and loneliness of growing up. This week's guest does it in an elegantly told story that also explores immigration, environmental change, and the power of friends to make everything better. She's Padma Venkatraman, this week on Story in the Public Square. Hello and welcome to Story in the Public Square, where storytelling meets public affairs. I'm Jim Ludis from the Pell Center at Salve Regina University.
And I'm G. Wayne Miller, also with Salve's Pell Center.
And our guest this week is an old friend of the show. Padma Venkatraman is an award-winning author whose new novel for younger readers is Safe Harbor. Padma, it's so great to see you again.
It is wonderful and such an honor to be on your show again.
You know, I was telling you before we started that I was profoundly moved by Safe Harbor. We're going to talk about it and a few other things as well. But for the folks at home who maybe haven't read it yet, why don't you just give us a quick overview?
Sure. So Safe Harbor is, on the face of it, just a story about a little girl who moves from India to America. And one day, as she's walking along the seashore, she finds a seal. And she's walking along the seashore because she's quite lonely. And she finds a seal with plastic wrapped around it. And as she works to save the seal, her world begins to open up in ways that, she didn't expect.
It is a story told in verse.
Yes.
Tell us about the decision to go that way in telling this particular story and some of the challenges that you faced then in writing like that.
Sure. So I think for me, my novels come in different ways to me, and this one came to me, I think, as a novel in verse in part because music is such an important theme in the novel, and I think in poetry, the language is made to sing. And so I feel like the form of a novel in verse married so well with one of the themes in Safe Harbor, and I think that's why it's written in verse. And you are absolutely right. Writing in verse is quite a challenge because you have to really be spare but not sparse. And those two are quite different. So you have to use the right words and be careful not to go on and on because you don't have a whole lot of space.
This was something that you and I talked about before, which is that we read a lot of books for the show. And sometimes you read a book and you're like, oh, there's a lot of words, I don't know just really what happened. In this particular case, with such a tremendous efficiency and economy of language, you evoke really strong and powerful emotions. Do you realize that in the moment when you're writing it?
First of all, I'm going to say you're evoking a very powerful emotion in me to cry, which would be a first time on your show, so I don't want to do that. But I think I feel the emotion. I'm not so conscious of sort of choosing the right words to evoke an emotion in the reader. I'm almost, I feel like I know channeling sounds awful, but I do feel like I'm channeling those words to evoke that evoke emotion in me and to sort of capture how I am feeling. And when I say I, for me, a lot of times when I'm writing in the first person, or even if I'm not, I start to not only sort of identify with the character so much that I'm thinking about them. When I dream as though I am the character. So it's not a point of view that I'm thinking, she's doing this, she's doing that. I feel like I am doing this, I am doing that. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about two of the central characters, Gita, the girl, and Amma, her mother.
Yeah, sure.
They come to America, as you said, from India. But give us a little more about both of these characters, who, by the way, are exquisitely drawn. I mean, they all are.
Thank you so much.
And I was like Jim. There were points when I'm reading it's like I had to stop and take a breath. Anyway, tell us about Gita and Amma.
So Amma is a little like my Amma in India. I was growing up in India. I moved much later to the United States, but in Gita's case, what happens is her mother is divorced from her father, which is even today in Indian society, not as common or as accepted as it is here. So she's having a difficult time, and because of that, she decides that she will have a much better life in the United States, and so she immigrates to the United States to study, to make a life of her own. And Geeta initially is not happy with mom at all. And so she's very angry with Amma. And so she brings the loneliness and the homesickness, but she's angry with her. And in a reversal of some things that you often see in books, in this case, it's the young child that's wanting to hold on to the traditions and home. And it's mom, in this case, Amma, who is the person who wants to be, American, to root herself in this new place. So that's a little bit of a sort of, turning the stereotype a bit on its head.
It's an immigrant story, obviously, and that could not be more timely in 2025, correct? I mean, given everything happening in the world and in the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that,
Was that in your mind when you were writing it, or?
I think sometimes there's so much that comes out, whatever I'm thinking about subliminally, and I have been, thinking about that a lot, about how much immigrants have contributed to this country and how they're being treated and viewed now, which is pretty horrendous. And I think we need to understand what an amazing, the reason I came to this country is because there was a sort of welcoming and an ability to be free, to think freely, to do all of these things, which we need to preserve in our society so that we can draw people from all over the world and make this culture what it is, which is so vibrant because it has so many colors, it has so many flavors, and we need to keep it that way.
And you bring some of those diverse flavors into the story, and so there's so many wonderful themes that you capture. There's issues of bullying. There's the immigrant experience. There's also the power of friendship, the importance of the environment. I'm curious, when you sit down to write a story like this, do you have that clear arc? Do you know that Miguel is going to live around the corner, or is that something that comes to you in the process of writing?
I think it comes to me in the process of writing. So the book came to me when I was taking a walk by the seashore. I saw a seal, and my seal, look at me using the possessive. Just went straight.
Geeta calls it my seal.
Exactly, right? So I was going to call, the Marine Mammal Hotline, which is what, if any viewers watching and you see a mammal, you shouldn't go too close to it. You should call the Marine Mammal Hotline. I did that, and mine just went straight back into the water, so there was no issue there. But then, of course, as authors, as you both know, and Wayne has written so many books too, we like to make things not so happy. And so I started to suddenly, in my head, see this seal with plastic wrapped around it. And then I realized that it's very rare. I used to love books that were sort of animal rescue type books.
Yeah.
And this is much more than that, with all the layers and the themes interwoven. But on the face of it, you can see that that's kind of where it started. And when I was a kid, I never saw animal rescue books that had dark-skinned kids rescuing the animal. And so, obviously, I think also subliminally, now we have an animal rescue book on which we have on the cover 2 dark-skinned kids who are rescuing it, and the marine mammal veterinarian, who also comes and plays a very important role in the novel, is a black woman.
So tell us about Miguel. Jim mentioned Miguel. He is about Geeta's age, and they become friends, and that's, again, another sub-theme. That's their friendship and...
Yeah, their friendship, and they're both immigrants.
Yes.
They have similarities in terms of, Miguel also has parents who are divorced. And then they connect through music. And to me, music is this wonderful thing in the novel that, takes us into this place where ecology, as you pointed out, and environment, and, all of that is such an important theme in the novel. But there are different ways to connect to it. Now, when I came as an immigrant, I came here and I became an oceanographer and a scientist, and I think that's very important, and it's one of the ways that we have to conserve our planet through science. But there's also so much ancient wisdom, both in Miguel's culture and in Geeta's culture, of music and the way that it communicates without language. And Geeta struggles with language in the book because she knows English, but English is used differently in America.
And the spellings are different too for very, very many common words.
Exactly.
So you have agreed to do a reading, and that will give our audience a sense of what the book is about. So, Padma, if you could read the passage that you selected, please.
Of course I will. And also, though, I just wanted to say music is sort of this, universal communication thing in this book where she's able to communicate a little bit across species. But one of the things that Geeta does when she feels a little bit lonely is one of the things I did when I came here and I felt a little lonely as an immigrant. She goes to a public library, and that's the part that I'm going to read out loud to you. I go to the public library after school as often as I can. I love how opening a book is like opening a door, taking me to a different time and place, into someone else's head and heart. I love the silence of libraries, broken only by the leafy breeze sound of someone turning the page of a book. If library was a kind of perfume, I'd want to spray it on my hands, the scent of words preserved and passed down, sometimes from an author who lived ages ago to a reader who exists here and now.
I love it. When I came across that page, I lingered on that page and kept reading it again and again, because obviously we all love libraries, so we all should love libraries.
What resonated with me there is the idea that each individual book is its own portal to a world, right? When I remember being a graduate student and having a stack of books I was getting through for my exams, and thinking about each of those books was this world that anybody could access if they would go to the library.
Right.
You are concerned about the access to books and to stories and to those worlds. Tell us a little bit about your work there.
Sure. So I am the co-leader of the Rhode Island chapter of Authors Against Book Bans, which is a new national organization. And one of the things we're trying to do is something we shouldn't have to do in America, which is we're trying to get a safe harbor law passed in our state to protect the freedoms of, librarians and teachers and educators, but also book creators, so authors and illustrators, because there's been a lot of angst about books, and people think, there's pornographic books for young people on the shelves and all of this kind of thing. And the first thing I want to say to anyone who thinks that is, look, I am a parent. I have a kid. I am obviously, I would love to protect my child. We all want to do that. But I think it's very important to understand that while we do want our children to grow up with our values, we have no business in a democracy preventing someone else from bringing their values and their feelings to their kids. So we need all books on shelves. And I think I feel very, very strongly about that. Book banning is not a great thing. And the book I talked about, I think last time on your show, Born Behind Bars, has been challenged. And it was taken off the shelves in Pinellas County in Florida. The Bridge Home recently got a challenge from a school in Massachusetts.
On what grounds?
I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it, but among other things, somebody objected to the fact that poverty was portrayed in India.
Wow. So you belong to Authors Against Book Bans.
Yeah.
And you're also a regional leader in that. Talking about libraries and safe spaces, I chaired a board of a public library for many years in a town where I used to live. And we built a new library on my watch. And at that time, many years ago, nobody even thought of a library as a place where there could be danger, where librarians could fear for their safety. Talk about that, because that's true now in some parts of the country.
Librarians,
not just librarians,
authors,
patrons, authors. It's a horrible state of affairs.
It is an awful state of affairs, because I have had authors feel like in certain places when they walk up, is something going to happen to them? I've been in those situations myself. We've all received hate mail. Librarians and authors and teachers receive death threats sometimes. And we have to take a step back and try to think to ourselves, what are we doing? In a democracy, we have no space for violence to be a tool for anything, A, and B, teachers, librarians, authors who write for young people are some of the people who are most interested in seeing young people do well. We are not interested in anything else, right? And we, again, I cannot say enough how much we need all books in libraries. And when you want to protect your own child, that is fine. If you think that you need to protect your child from a book, which itself I have a little bit of trouble with, because honestly, if there's something you object to in a book, you can
Close
shut
the
it.
book. Yeah.
And you can put it away. And it's so easy. It's not as though exposure to ideas is going to, do anything but expand your mind. And you don't have to agree with every character you meet in a book. You're never going to. But that's fine. Empathy for other people is such an important thing. And I think books are, in a way, little ships of that sail the ocean of, I say compassion on my website, but I would say also the ocean of empathy.
So
empathetic
one of the
imagination.
themes, one of the things that you explore in the book is bullying, right?
Yes.
Gita confronts a bully, and I learned in a high school theater class that good storytelling is about something happening. And there's something happening with Gita finding her own courage and having her own confidence that leaps from these pages. That's the part for me.
Yeah.
Those moments where she was bullying and she was sort of talking to herself to find the courage to go on, that I found so incredibly evocative.
Thank you. Yeah, I felt like I wanted this book to be something that was empowering for young people because unfortunately we are living, you were speaking about immigration and the sort of backlash we're seeing now, that translates into a lot of bullying in schools, an unwelcoming climate for people of color, for anybody who is perceived as different in a particular community. Many of the books that we see being pulled off shelves now are just because the author is LGBTQ+, for instance,
Right.
and so on. And I think I wanted this to be a book that a kid would see themselves and feel empowered to be who they are, and to be able to, of course, empowering and saving the environment as well, because sometimes I feel like, and especially right now in this country, many of us might feel like there are so many things that are happening to us and that we have no agency.
Right.
And I want to always say we have agency as long as we can preserve hope. And that's one of the first things that, Gita says, hope is a cork that never stops bobbing on the waves of life's ocean. And I feel like so long as we hold on to hope, we can, as Gita says somewhere else, build hope with our hands. She's actually there doing things to conserve our planet, to keep our planet green, to keep our oceans blue, and to keep our cultures empathetic and welcoming and respectful and equal.
And that
inclusive.
narrative plays out during the book. Gita gets bullied during lunch.
Right.
And she has a really good teacher who gives her some relief from that.
Who offers a safe harbor.
Who offers a
Exactly.
safe harbor. As that narrative continues to unfold through the book, Gita and Miguel organize a beach cleanup.
Yeah.
Clean the beach. And they get members of the community, they get kids from the school. It's an overwhelming success. And the worst of the bullies during the cleanup comes over and apologizes to her. And again, that showed the power of community action. That showed the power or the possibility of forgiveness and change in people's attitudes. And that was so wonderful.
Thank you.
Again,
I was moved to, at the end of the book, you talk about your own personal experience
Yeah.
with that kind of trauma.
Yeah.
How personal is it to write something like this?
It is quite personal, and I think that in Gita's mother especially, I saw myself, because one of the things that we see a lot in children's literature especially is we see, and we're doing a much better job now of showing protagonists who have mental health challenges or chronic mental illness or mental health issues.
There's less stigma now.
Exactly, there's much less stigma now with that, and we see protagonists with that. But even so, with kids' books these days, we again and again and again, even in modern kids' books, see parents, especially moms, portrayed with depression or anxiety or trauma, all of which I live with, and they're portrayed as mothers, or I'm saying mothers because that's the, usually the parent, who checks out completely, is blamed, is told stuff like, don't you dare do this again to me, kind of thing. And I think to myself, listen, it's living with something. We can manage it. Some of us, there are different things. I'm not trying to take away how important it is or how, how much of a challenge it can be. But then again, we don't tell somebody with, hearing loss, which I also have, hey, you've got to stop hearing better, or stop saying that you have hearing loss,
you
right?
Can change
that,
if
exactly.
If you just have the willpower or the strength of character or whatever, all that, I'm not going to use the word that came to mind, but nonsense. I'll say it there.
Right, and I think so. I think we need greater understanding. And also, if we have no adult role models in books that live with depression and are independent and strong and great parents and great family people, how are we going to get kids to think that suddenly in adulthood they'll be fine?
Right. Well, and how do you? I think this ties back to the book banning question too. If you don't, if you're not exposed to divisive issues, right? There's actually a movement in this country to ban divisive content in schools, which I find absolutely shocking. Because how do you learn from history if you can't confront those dark moments?
The answer is you don't learn from history.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that teachers and librarians can do so well is teach our young people to distinguish fact from opinion.
Yeah.
And it's so important these days to try to find out what is a real fact, how do you go to those facts? And speaking of what you're talking about, divisiveness or whatever else, anything, what a safe harbor a book can be, because you deal with that issue in all its complexity through those characters vicariously, and that book is not going to hurt you. It may change your life in a positive way, but it's not going to harm you.
Talk about another of my favorite characters in the book, the seal, Santo. I love watching the seal. It's sick at times, it's maybe not going to get better, could possibly even die, then it starts to get better. And then the day comes when Gita and Miguel have to release the seal, and she plays something on her flute. Talk about that seal. Is that a metaphor for something? It was woven almost from start to finish, and again, it was like, this is amazing. How did she come up with this animal that we love so much?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's so many things. It's again this creature that preserves its hope, its will to live, and at the end in that scene, it's about learning to let go. And one of the lines in the book is, if I remember it correctly, love is about holding with our hearts but not our hands.
Yeah.
And so, all of us.
That.
Yeah. And I think, all of us, speaking of children and wanting to protect children, from whatever you think is, banned content or whatever in a book, or you think it should be banned, I don't think. But we try to hold with our hands too much sometimes the people we love. And if we trusted and we held with our hearts instead and gave them the freedom and the space they need to grow and be who they are in a loving way, and to create that loving environment for them, I think we'd be better off.
There's a respect for children that you're describing in that.
Yes. I think...
It's there in all your books.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes people will tell me, well, when are you going to write a book for grown-ups, as though you grow up more when you do that. And I think I have other books in me for adults as well that will get written, but I feel an enormous responsibility to help empower our children, because in a way, with climate change, which is a big theme in this book, we've been a lot of the problem. And I think, to me, part of the solution needs to be to empower our people and, of course, our young people, and also to be there at their side, sharing our wisdom, working alongside them as we try to change
And there's,
things.
I mean, there's wisdom too in this. If I am in my mind's eye, I was 12 years old again, reading this book, thinking about what would I learn about navigating bullies, and friendship, and the cafeteria, and the playground, because of the stories that you tell.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an incredible service.
Thank you. And I think that's what books do. And some of the books that are being, I want to say, I'm saying some because I'm sure maybe whatever, but almost every book that I've seen that has been banned and has been taken off shelves and challenged is a book that will empower a child in some way, is a book that will help a child navigate something.
Let me read just one more thing about the seal, because I just love that seal. But it speaks to something so much bigger. Gita says, I will never see my seal again, but my music, my poetry, my love for him will always be with me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah.
Padma Venkatraman, the book is Safe Harbor. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. That is all the time we have this week, but if you want to know more about Story in the Public Square, you can find us on social media or visit pellcenter.org, where you can always catch up on previous episodes. He's Wayne, I'm Jim, asking you to join us again next time for more Story in the Public Square.